Once you've mastered a couple different simple canes, like the checkerboard and the jelly roll, if you combine those together, you can make what we call a complex cane. This flower cane that I'm holding was made by putting a checkerboard cane in the middle and using the jelly roll canes along the outside for the petals. Now let's get started. To make a flower cane, you're going to need two different canes, and first we're going to transform the checkerboard cane into a round cane. You do that by gently squishing on the outsides of the checkerboard cane. Remember how we just so carefully worked that checkerboard cane so that we wouldn't distort the squareness? Well, now we're going to distort the squareness. So just put a lot of finger pressure on the outsides. And once you have it sort of softened and moving and you can feel the clay moving under your fingers, you'll be able to roll it down. I'm going to set this one aside and use one that I've already worked further. And you can see now that our checkerboard is a circle instead of a square. Also, I'm using the stripes on the outside. I want to make sure that those are always in line. The same thing goes for the jelly roll cane. Remember when we made the initial cane and I showed you this line on the outside? That makes a perfect register mark. If you reduce the cane with that green line showing, you can see it's very helpful. Like this piece of cane here has the register mark twisted along the outside edge. And if I just simply straighten that back up, that will ensure that not only the outside is still in a straight line, but the inside of the cane as well. That'll come in really handy later when you start making faces and very exotic canes. You'll want to have a register mark on the outside so that you can twist it straight and make sure that the inside of the cane is just as straight as the outside. So for a flower cane like this one, you're going to need 6 times as much of the petal cane or the jelly roll cane as you have for the inside of the flower, which is the checkerboard. So I'm going to start with about this much checkerboard. That means I need 6 times this amount for the jelly roll. I have that right here in the form of 2 canes, and I'm going to section each of these to match up with the checkerboard length. Just take your super slicer and gently roll through this, cutting each piece into a length about the same as the checkerboard. I'm just using that rolling technique again because it's pretty warm in this room and the clay is getting warm. So this just ensures that I don't squish the cane. Okay, once you have all your pieces in place, you'll want to start lining the jelly roll cane up on the outside. Remember that register mark that I talked about? You can see it very faintly right here, that green line. I'm going to line up my petals so that the green line is always toward the inside by the checkerboard middle. So I just start on one end and gently press the cane along the outside. Another thing I like to do is always make sure the swirls in my jelly roll cane are going the same direction, like they are right here. If I turn this around the other way, you can see how the swirl goes backwards. But I think the cane looks neater if you keep that all organized. Keep that register mark toward the middle and your swirls going in the same direction. So just add these on one at a time and go slowly until you're all the way around. Now just one more time, I want to do a visual check that all my swirls are going in the same direction. All right, now at this point, I could squeeze this really hard and start rolling it on my work surface and turn it into a round cane. But I like to preserve the gaps in between each petal because I think it looks more like a flower. So what you want to do is just visually imagine what shape of clay you would need to fill that gap. And to my way of thinking, that looks like a triangle with the point going down in between the black layers and then a flat piece across here. So I'll take some conditioned, take another color of clay and that you want it to be really soft and conditioned, and I'm going to form it into a triangle shape like this. I'll start with a round rod, and then using a lot of finger pressure, I'll push down on the work surface, using the work surface to flatten the bottom edge, and using my fingers to make 2 more edges. So that if you look at this from one end, you can see that the pressure between my fingers and the pressure from the work surface actually created a triangular shaped cane. This in and of itself is a cane as well. Even though it doesn't have a pattern or other colors involved, it's still the element of a cane. So now I'm ready to push this down in between each petal. I'll put the triangle right in place, down between the blacks in that crevice, and I'm using quite a bit of finger pressure to push it into place. Then I'll lay it down on my work surface and trim. Then I'll go again. I usually work directly opposite the area I just worked and apply pressure to this side next. And trim, and I have more of that triangle shape here. You can see how the ends of the cane are somewhat distorted. And remember how I mentioned earlier that when making canes, you usually don't get to use 100%. Usually the ends come out a little bit distorted just because that part of the clay moves more quickly than the rest of the clay in the middle. I have one here. Oh, and I just need one more piece real quickly. And I'll seat that right down in between the last two petals. Once you've gone this far, then you want to go back all around and check and make sure that the clay is seated down perfectly inside that crevice and that there aren't any gaps. I'm just using a lot of finger pressure and finger checks to make sure that the clay feels nice and solid. Okay, at this point, we're once again ready to reduce. If you'll remember, like we reduced earlier on the jelly roll cane, you just start by applying a lot of pressure toward the middle of the cane and working outward. You always want to work from the middle out to make sure if you're pushing any air bubbles around in there that you're always pushing them outward. Practicing really good consistent techniques is the way to make canes that are easy to work with and easy to reduce, and canes that you'll enjoy using on other projects. Once the clay really starts to moving, then we're ready to roll it on the work surface, working from the center out toward one end and from the center out toward another end. You remember earlier I talked about how the clay is very warm, I'm very warm, the room is very warm, and when you go to slice a warm cane you can get some distortion from your blade. So what I have here is a cane that's been sitting for quite some time. I made this a few days ago in my studio, and this one will slice really easily, and it makes it possible for you to get some very thin slices off of the end of a cane. Once I have a really thin slice, I can use this for a veneer over the top of other projects or even a piece of jewelry. Let me show you how quickly to make an earring from a piece of clay like that. You could obviously bake that, punch a hole in it and put a dangle on it or an ear wire for a dangle earring, but I like to add a little more interest by creating a dome. Just take a solid piece of color of clay, dome it up with your fingers, and you want it to be slightly smaller than the diameter of the flower cane slice that we just cut. Now I want to just make sure this is really nice and soft because, like I said, this cane had been sitting for a little while. So I'm just going to pinch it and get some of my body heat going through it, and then shape it over the top of the dome. Now I think that adds quite a bit more visual interest than just a flat slice. At this point then, you could bake this, drill a hole in it, or even pre-poke a hole before you bake it. Add an ear wire, and you've got a nice dangle earring. Well, I hope that you'll start really experimenting with jelly rolls and checkerboards and what you can do with those to make complex canes. They're loads of fun, and all your friends will wonder how you did it.